Hello everyone, this is Sandy Gagan. I'm just going to be talking to you today about setting up the preliminary foundation for the portrait. And this is included if you decide to start a figure drawing as well. So one of the things that's most important is to get this shell. So if you can nail down this shape, and this is very much a two-dimensional shape, this is the most important decision you're going to make in your drawing. So this is two-dimensional, and then as always, we're going to move and take it into a three-dimensional shape. So right here, we're seeing the three-dimensional head. And the things that I want you to pay attention to is here's the top of the head. Remember that the high point is at the parietal, and that's right in here. And so that's thinking in terms of head lengths. Now, this is where the corner of the hair is. On a bald person, you would just use the top of the head. So this is right here, the midline or center line. This is how you determine what is the rotation for the figure itself. And these construction lines, they're just the beginning shell. You're going to develop the drawing on top of this shell. And so what I want you to get is number one, the height. Number two, get this front plane of the face in the position that you're seeing it. So this can be very, it can vary from person to person. You're getting the top alignment from the top of the skull down to the bottom of the chin or the mandible. The mandible is the bottom of the chin, and that's the technical term. So then you're going to divide, you've got your midline or center line, you've drawn the back of the skull here, and you're acquiring the back and the height of the skull. So you've got your height, width, and depth. And that's what you need for a three-dimensional form is height, width, and depth. Really important in drawing the figure. So then you're going to, from this basic shape, you're going to take the top of the superciliar arch or brow ridge. And that's this decision, and it's a third of the way down that front plane of the face. The average human being, the front plane of the face is from right here on your wrist down to the top of your middle finger. So that is about one head length right from here to here. And that's a good measurement. And if you hold your hand up to your drawing and you can decide from here to here, you can determine really easy what is life size. So that's the front plane of the face. And here we have the outer convexity of the front plane of the face. We're going to divide this down. And to understand proportions, we're going to first start with the idealized. So here we have a third, and here we have a third. Now this lines up with the base of the nose. So right here, this is the top of the superciliar arch. Or another term for it is brow ridge. Okay, so that brow ridge is where the alignment for the brow itself. Now notice that it's always at a 45-degree angle to your midline, and that these decisions down the form are always parallel in space. Now that's a really important concept because as you start drawing the portrait, sometimes what I've observed students do is they begin to draw the brow ridge on one plane, the lower portion of the orbital cavity here on another plane, and the base of the nose on another. Now from the base of the nose to this decision of the mandible right here, this breaks down with the midline of the mouth being 2/3. So 2/3 this, 1/3 here to 2/3 here. So that's the midline of the mouth. And then the thickness of the bottom lip is half here to here, half here to here. So I'm going to adjust those proportions just slightly. And that's a very common thing. If you don't get this right in this stage, then you're going to have problems getting likeness. It's this shape right here that you get likeness for the form. So again, the midline of the mouth is 2/3 from here to here, with the base of the bottom of the lip being half of here to here, half here to here. So this is the halfway, and that's the bottom of the lip, the colored portion of the lip. Okay, so those are some good general basics. Now overall, the proportions that you're going to look for on a skull, this is the canon or proportional decisions for the artist Robert Beverly Hale. And he was really truly amazing at anatomy, and a lot of what we know comes from information that he gave us. The proportions of this rectangular form in 1.3/4 rotations is, this is a 6 depth, so here is 6 deep. Okay, so here's 6. The height to length ratio here is 7, and the wide point of the skull is where I've showed you this before, that's 5. So that's the proportions when someone is looking at you directly in 1-point perspective and you see equal amount of each side of the ear, that's 1-point perspective. Now, a profile point of view, and this is something that, you know, it took me a while and some training to be able to understand that in profile, the human skull is mostly square-like. Okay, so we've got this skull fitting in here in this shape, so that it's very different than when you have a skull that is in 1-point perspective. So that's how we think about this skull, is in profile. It's basically in a square-like shape, and as we get more towards 1-point or 3/4, it shifts and it becomes much more rectangular. Okay, so if you look in your book and that doesn't make sense, then that's why. So this is profile. So another important landmark is from the superciliar arch to the base of the orbital cavity, and I've showed you this on an actual skull. I'll do it again in person. But this is the base of where the eyeball would sit in here, and it's about 1 inch in diameter. The width of this decision, if you were to cube this out like this, okay, so here, I'll put an extra one here, and I'm going to run out of space. It's 5, let me do that again in a different spot so that I have room to do it. Okay, so I'll do it down here for you. So across that plane, the eye width is 5 eyes wide. Now, an eye width is basically, an eye width is 1 inch in diameter. And so it's 5 inches across, and that's how that's determined. So here we have, all right, so 5 eyes across. Well, this is becoming side plane here because this is where the parietal is. So the eye width of the eyes takes place within this distance. And the center point of that is the lacrimal duct or tear duct, and it's the anatomical center of the human form. So here's the anatomical center, and it's the halfway point. And I know that this would vary depending on your eye level to the actual model that you're drawing. And again, when we're using any kind of a Canon, it's in the idealized. So here's the lacrimal duct, and it's half here to here and half here to here. So that's why that's the anatomical center. And it's called the lacrimal duct or the tear duct. That's the more common name. And if you measure on this skull, it's here to here, here to here. So that's halfway. What I'm doing here is just using my fingers as calipers. I'm holding them very steady so that I can measure with my fingers. And that gives me that distance. Okay, so the next proportional distance that you're going to need to know is that the base of the nose is 1 eye width. So 1 eye width. So the nose at the base is 1 eye width. So you've got a distance of an eye width between both lacrimal ducts. Right? That's a really important decision as well. Okay, so I've got some drawing examples here. I'm going to post this drawing of the planes of the head. On the advanced figure drawing, you've already received an accroché that I want you to duplicate, and here's the planes of the head. Get that straight on the camera. And this really helps you learn structure, and that's what we're talking about today. Okay, so in its basic shape, we want this decision, the base of the chin, the top or the high point of the skull, and here we have the back of the skull. Okay, breaking this down, we have the top of the superciliar arch, the base of the nose, the midline of the mouth, and the base of the bottom of the lip. And these measurements between here and here are what give you likeness. Okay, and if you'll side up using a plumb line, where that neck intersects is going to be in alignment with plumb. Now, the distance in negative space here to here, that's really important as well. You'll have to look for that. All right, so first off, I want you to finish up on these two examples right up here. And here I've drawn out for you what we're looking at. So these are more from an animator's point of view. This is a very important decision right here. This rhomboid-like shape, sorry, not trapezoid, rhomboid-like shape is the glabella. Okay, so that's glabella. That's the nose root, and the nose projects out and away from that decision. This is a wedge-like shape. It has a height and it has side planes, and that's basically how your nose sits on the front plane of your face. Now here is the top of that brow ridge that I talked about right here, and it's known as the orbital cavity. So at the base of this we have the lacrimal ducts that we were discussing, and you can see the shape. You can see it first as this whole shape right here. This is the orbital cavity as seen on this drawing. Okay, this is the zygomatic, and this zygomatic bone and right here is the zygomatic bone, and we have this arch that comes back on the skull right here called the zygomatic arch. So right here is where it becomes side plane. So this is the front plane of the skull, and this becomes side plane, with this being the top plane of the skull. Now, on the common name of the forehead, there is a 3-part plane change, and watch for that, because it influences how you'll model the form for any type of, whether you're doing a drawing or painting of a portrait. You have to see this 3-part plane change. And then coming down this form, there is a 2-part plane change right here from the top of the sinus eminence or superciliar arch, and then one up to here. The forehead on a female is much rounder and slopes back gently, and the male forehead is much more angular. Again, these are not gender differences that are, they are meant as something that helps teach us about form and how form is created and how to make that unique to the model that you're drawing. Okay, so this line right here represents the muscle of the muzzle, and then here is this form right here is coming down. Here's the top of the lip, and right here we have 2 high points. This comes up into this section, and it's a contour like form. It's called the philtrum, and there's often a highlight right here and right here, and a little highlight that comes here. Depending on the direction of the light source, if the light source is here, we would have a cast shadow coming off the base of the nose, because this is a wedge-like shape that protrudes from the form. The midline of the mouth, this is the opening of the mouth, and I mentioned it's right here, it's 2/3 here, 2/3 here, ending in a form that's called a node. And we'll talk more about this as we talk about the musculature. Just take note of that. It's called the node. So here's the base of the bottom of the colored portion of the lip. This is a downturned plane right here, meaning that that plane turns away from the light. And this ends right here in a decision called the mental sulcus. So this line right here is the mental sulcus. All right, there's a big muscle that comes underneath the mandible and goes up underneath the zygomatic and attaches up here on the temporal bone. It's called the masseter, and that helps form this muzzle-like shape. All right, so that's what I wanted to discuss on the planes of the skull. Again, this is really important. These exercises really help teach you, and I think it's fundamental to the drawing. So I want to mention this is what you're drawing, you're seeing underneath this form. You're seeing structure, and that's really vital to the drawing. You're seeing structure. So here's the line that represents the outside convexity or the hairline or arabesque. But underlying this, we're seeing the structure of the skull and the same components that we just talked about. Okay, so then we're going to look at in profile again. Here's the profile that I was talking about. So again, here's the midline of the form. Here it goes back. Let me take that down a little so it's not moving as I'm drawing. This goes back to the high point of the parietal. This back plane to here, this is the back called the occiput plane right in here. And it's a flat plane that we as mammals have that no other skulls actually have that. And it's one of the things that allows us to lay flat. This is the base of the back of the skull, ending right here. There's an anatomical term called the mastoid process. coming down into the midline of the jaw or the mandible. But this is the basic whole form that you've got to be looking for. All right. Now, once you have acquired that, and that's really important that you do that. So the next thing I want to talk about is how you actually draw the convexities of this in block-in. So one of the things that I recommend to all my students is that you draw just a holding place. So basically this rhomboid-like shape that when you're drawing from a model, either a photograph or in life, you just want to hold this as the place the head's going to be. I'm not going to get really involved in drawing the head until I make sure that I've got the figure well established. Okay, so then as I have gotten this process right here, gotten this three-dimensional form and seen that, gotten this shape, thinking like this rhomboid-like shape, and putting it as a placeholder. So I started this drawing out with this midline. That's very important to see that midline. Some anatomy books will show that as a rounded line. That really never worked for me. I like just a midline or a center line that's straight. It's much more helpful to me to know how to use that. Okay, so when you begin, again, just like this decision, we're looking at these two key points. So where this form turns, that's really important, because this hairline or mass of the hair, that becomes side plane. So side plane. Okay, so right here is the top of the skull, the parietal, and we've got, this is the superciliar arch right here. And I think I'm going to get a softer pencil so that you can see this a little better. So here's the top of the superciliar arch right here. And notice that the base of the nose is going to be parallel to this. And then the midline of the mouth, down this whole trajectory, I don't want to start drawing feature right away. I want to get my proportions of length done correctly, because that is essential. If you don't understand how to acquire this, then it's going to be a real problem to you to get lightness. So the base of the nose to the bottom of the chin, use this proportion to this proportion is 2/3. The bottom of the lip would be half here to here, half here to here. Now the ear sits back on the skull. It is not a vertical. It sits at a 15-degree angle. Okay, so the top of the ear, depending, and you're going to find this by sighting, by choosing shape. And the base of the nose is the distance of the length of the ear. So you're going to take the ear height from the superciliar arch or brow ridge to this portion of the base of the nose. And look at it in strictly in profile, it's going to be halfway. But you're going to have to measure. And one of my favorite places to measure from is to do a construction line across the form from the base of the glabella. That helps me to orient, and I'm going to do some construction lines to the back of the nose, to the lacrimal duct, to the height of the eye. Always use your construction lines. They look like spider webs, but they incorporate into your drawing. So never hesitate to use those. You're going to get the mandible and the depth of that by sighting across this whole trajectory to this whole trajectory. So you've got this whole distance here, and you're going to sight from this line, from the glabella, along this distance to sight its length. Okay, so you're sighting the angle right here to get the length of the mandible. But do realize that the ear is behind the back of the mandible. It is always behind. Okay, the average human neck is 4 inches. And again, we talked about the proportions of length. All right, next, what I'd like to talk about is, especially for the advanced figure drawing, we're not going to get into value yet, but let's talk about, as you build this drawing, what I'm looking for is, I'm looking for the construction line of the light logic. So if you see a cast shadow or a form shadow edge, that's a line you're going to put in. So all of these lines right here are indicators of the light logic, and you don't need to fill them in even at this point, but you can leave like a cairn to come back that way. So that's just fine, and just do it in one direction obliquely at a 45-degree angle. So here's the base of the chin, here's this where the angle of the neck is coming in, and this is the cast shadow. So this is form shadow edge right along here. This is cast shadow. And they happen pretty simultaneously. Notice that the features, here's the lacrimal duct. Notice how it relates to the top plane of the nose. Notice that there's an eye width between here. And here's the lacrimal duct here. Use a plumb line. And that plumb line, if you were to hold a weight at the bottom of a string, or sight up on your pencil, so you're looking from here to here, that gives you a plumb line. And a plumb line can be both vertical and horizontal. Also watch your negative spaces. So positive form is this shape right here, and negative form. And that's really important to be able to see that. Leave the eye, don't start drawing eyelashes, just get its width and its height. Later, as we move into the dynamics of the eye itself, we'll do more, but we'll do that in value, not with line to begin with. All right, so next, this is a drawing by Rob Zeller. I thought it's done really well, and I want to just talk about some of the things that Rob talked about in his book called The Figurative Artist's Handbook. And it's a book I highly recommend. It's done very well, and it has some really nice drawings and illustrations in it. I got it off of Amazon. So again, let me just mark this down and talk about what Rob was teaching you in this. So here we have a good whole basic drawing, and he has looked for the clavicle line. Here's the suprasternal notch right here. You've got the mapping of this shape. This is the most important shape that you're going to see. No amount of feature will cover up for this not being correct. You will not get likeness unless that's correct. So here you have the brow ridge, the lacrimal duct line, the width of the nose here to here is an eye width coming up to the lacrimal duct, the midline of the mouth, the base of the colored portion of the ear. But the most essential portion, and I think I'll highlight this for you in red, is that this is the most essential portion of this drawing is right here. So let's talk about what you're looking at when you're looking at this shape. So shape, we're going to draw a couple of ways. We're going to do comparative measurement. That means that we're sighting angles and comparing them. And we're looking for shape. So this is a shape that we need to see. Here is the mass of the hair. I don't get too concerned about that at the beginning. I just kind of mass out the hair. I'm not looking for individual shapes or curls or anything, just a positive, negative shape. Now, here is the forehead right in here, and it's a 3-part plane change. Here's the top of the forehead. This is what's commonly referred to as the widow's peak. Then right here, this is the zygomatic. And if you were to put a pair of glasses down on this cheekbone, this is where your zygomatic turns if you were to put that on the skull. So that's a good way to remember that. That the form or skull turns right there. So here is the neck. Here is the top of the shoulder line. So we've got this shoulder line, right there's the AC process that we've been looking for. Okay? So when you mass out the drawing, it's very important to get these big shapes. And that is the most important part of this drawing. If you want likeness in a drawing, that's where you begin. So I hope you've enjoyed this discussion about the early portion of the drawing. This is true of a portrait, and it's also true of starting out the whole figure. You're creating a placeholder for that drawing. And we'll talk more about this as we talk about individual features, also the musculature on top of the skull. But that's a really good thing to understand. And I'm going to encourage all of you to draw the planes of the head. This helps teach you the vital process of understanding the plane changes along the form. And these basic exercises, when you look at this, it looks pretty basic. But understanding this will help you to know how to model the form. So I really encourage you to take those drawings very seriously and memorize those shapes. Again, thank you for being with me here today, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care. This is Sandy. Goodbye.